It's July 21st, 1861. You've woken up in the morning full of glory. It's a good day. You have been spending 3 days marching, and now the battle is afoot. You're here at Bull Run. The Confederates, you have pushed back up towards this hill right behind you. You're pushing them and pushing them. But then that glory shifts. Because as the time you get to that top of that hill, there's a group of Virginians that fire a volley that is so deadly it takes that glory to gruesome. You now have to be in a full retreat. And as you're retreating, you hear a shriek, a howl, a noise you had never ever heard before, and you look back and this mass of Confederate soldiers making this noise that was so haunting is coming after you full bayonet. Bull Run has gone from glory to gruesome in a matter of hours. It's probably like when on the opening kickoff you return it to much celebration and fanfare, and then the rest of the game you get yourself routed and the score is 48-10. I'm sure that's how it feels a little bit, just instead of losing a football game, you're losing a battle. This is Bull Run. God. Before we get to the rout of the Union Army at Bull Run, we need to take a brief glimpse at the tiny bit of glory that the Union has in West Virginia, where I'm at right now. That's right. That's how much I like you guys. And it's not West Virginia, the state, it's West Virginia. Now, eventually, it will become the state of West Virginia. This area is very loyal to the Union. They have more of an economic tie to the Union than they do the Confederacy, so they don't want to leave. They want to stay with the Union. The Confederates know that it's important to try to hold on to that area, and one thing that they definitely want to do is put the Union into some economic hardships by cutting a major railroad line that goes from Washington, D.C. through Western Virginia into the Midwest, called the B&O Railroad Line. And yep, if you play Monopoly, it's that B&O Railroad Line. So the Confederates are going in there and they're tearing up the railroad line, trying to stop it. The Union needs a savior, and so they call upon a young general, George B. McClellan, graduated second in his class of 1846 from West Point, served with distinction in the American and Mexican War, then had a brilliant career as a businessman post-war. He's smart, he's intelligent, he's a fighter, and he orders his troops to go into West Virginia and completely decimates the Confederates. First, at the Battle of Philippi, where the Confederates practically ran as soon as the battle starts. And then he goes on to Rich Mountain, completely chasing the Confederates out of Western Virginia. In command of those Western Virginia Confederates was Robert E. Lee. McClellan whoops up on Bobby Lee. McClellan will tell his men, "Soldiers, I have heard that there was danger here. I have come to place myself at your head and share it with you. I fear now but one thing, that you will not find foemen worthy of your steel." After these victories, Mac will become a national hero and proclaimed the Little Napoleon. He's also a little bit egotistical.
5 minutes later.
Irvin McDowell has an army not like any other in the U.S. history. Prior to the Civil War, as you guys know, there was only 16,000 men in the standing army. He now has just with him, 37,000 troops there in Washington, D.C. He shares his plan to attack the Confederates. The Confederates are split. You have PGT Beauregard with 21,000 troops at Bull Run. And yes, that Pierre-Gustave Toutant Beauregard that we talked about at Fort Sumter. There's also another division of 11,000 Confederate soldiers led by Joseph E. Johnston at Winchester, Virginia, 45 miles away from Bull Run. Guarding that 11,000, McDowell has another 18,000 Union troops just to keep those guys in line so the two Confederates can't hook up. This is a flawless plan for an army that would have been seasoned. But these guys don't even know how to march. They sure as heck don't know how to shoot a gun, and now they have to go to battle. It's going to take McDowell's troops 3 days. 3 days in the hot Virginia sun to go 25 miles. It's a slow progress. Meanwhile, Patterson, who's supposed to watch Joseph E. Johnston, doesn't. And Joseph E. Johnston takes his 11,000 troops and adds them to the 21,000 Beauregard has. So now it's going to be 38,000 to 32,000 instead of 38 to 21. One of those generals that Joseph E. Johnston brings with him is going to be a guy we're going to be talking about, Thomas Jackson. On the morning of July 21st, Pierre-Gustave Toutant Beauregard is having breakfast at the Walter McLean house when it is interrupted by Union cannon fire. That's going to put a damper into your coffee. Meanwhile, Washington, D.C. residents, probably people like the name of Reginald and Gilbert, decided, "Hey Gilbert, you want to go watch a battle?" "Why yes, that would be lovely." And they actually bring their picnic baskets with their wives, dressed in their Sunday best, to watch a battle unfold. Goes to show you how unprepared we were for war, that people thought, we'll just take a picnic and go have a nice picnic as we watch the battle. As the Confederates are falling back from that first surprise of the Union attack, they fall back to from the Walter McLean house to the Henry Hill house. And there, on top of a ridge, is a gentleman in a blue uniform. He's Confederate, but he's wearing blue. That's because that was what the color of his Virginia Military Institute uniform was. He was an instructor, and his name is Thomas Jackson. He's watching the battle unfold on the field, and he's seeing his Confederates coming back towards him. He's not panicking. A piece of shrapnel from Union artillery fires, and that actually hits his left hand, mangling up his left middle finger and his left index finger. He says, "It's but a scratch," pulls out a handkerchief and ties it off. His officers that serve under him were both in shock, but also awe. Jackson tells his men to just hold, wait till they get closer, and then they will give them the bayonet, and when they do, to shriek like no other. As the Union boys continue coming closer to that ridge there, they do come across Jackson. And as like we said just a moment ago, it is a fired volley first into those Union lines, followed by that shriek. Off to the side of the battle is another Confederate general who sees Jackson's brilliant stand. His men have been falling back. And to rally his own men, he says, "Look there, boys. There's Jackson standing like a stone wall. Let us rally around him and the Virginians." Thus, we have one of the best badass names in history created, Stonewall Jackson. As the Union line is getting routed, they're running. They're running past the picnickers. Some of them are fast, some of them are slow, and those taking the picnics realize they gotta run too. This is gonna cause a problem because now, with the only one road, you have picnickers running, Union soldiers running, and there's a little bit of a traffic jam. Maybe you shouldn't picnic when you're watching a battle. Or you shouldn't just watch a battle in the first place. But it's good bread though.
5 minutes later.
By the evening, what took him 3 days to get from Washington, D.C. to Manassas, it took a number of guys just a few hours to get back. That's how fast they ran, and it was, in essence, every man for himself in running back to Washington, D.C. As the residents who lived in D.C. watched over the next couple days, they saw a long line of mangled human flesh, and they realized our war was going to be far more brutal than anything they imagined. The losses were staggering. For the Union, it's going to be 2,896. With out of those casualties, and casualties include wounded, missing, captured, as well as dead, it's about 640 dead. Total losses of those casualties is about 10%. That is a bloodbath in today's standards of military. For the Confederate, it's 1,982 casualties, with about 400 of them dead. These are numbers that Americans had never ever seen, and although they are going to pale later on compared to battles such as Antietam, which will have 25,000 in a single day, or Gettysburg, which will have over 50,000 during 3 days, it's still something that is so gravely shocking to our nation. There is also one civilian casualty, a grandmother, Judith Carter Henry, who lived in the house, but she was too sick and her kids couldn't move her from her bed. And unfortunately for Miss Henry, a cannonball came flying into her bedroom, killing her. So why was there so much carnage on this first battle? Well, one, it was a hot summer day. So there's going to be some guys that are just dehydrated and delusional. It's also hazy. Just think of what our hot summer days are like in that summer haze that you may have. Two, more importantly, both sides had no clue how to fight. Yes, more of the Southern boys, because they grew up in a rural agricultural society, knew how to fire a rifle because of hunting. But for the Union boys, a lot of them never even had ever held a gun before. They struggled just to march, and now they have to shoot at someone that's shooting back at them. As Union boys had left the battlefield, they dropped their rifles behind them, and they were supposed to only have one bullet in them. To show the inexperience of these guys, a lot of Confederates found when they were picking up some of these discharged or discarded rifles, they found 8-10 bullets in the rifle. They had no clue what they were doing for the Union Army. The other thing that's going to be confusing is there's no clear uniform yet. Stonewall Jackson is wearing his blue VMI uniform. There is reason to believe that a lot of the Union guys saw a gentleman on a horse, on a hill, wearing a blue uniform. They're thinking that's one of our own, and they marched right into it. Another thing that will be confusing are the two flags. The American flag and the very first Confederate flag are going to be very similar to each other, especially if it's not windy, such as what it is today, because the flags would have been drooping, and you would have just seen blue, red, and white folded up against each other. So it's understandable when they saw a flag in the distance that they thought it might be their own, and they marched into an enemy line. The Confederates are not going to pursue the routed Union Army, and President Jefferson Davis is going to be a little upset by it. But Beauregard pointed out that he was too disorganized in victory, probably more disorganized in his victory than the Union disorganization in their loss. Plus, Beauregard did not have the supplies nor the men to go into Washington, D.C. So Jefferson Davis is probably a little overshooting his assumption on the Confederate strength. Mary Chestnut, who will write a famous diary through it though, she will point out in her belief, she will predict on news of the Confederate victory that it is the fate that is going to cause the Confederates to fail. Even though they won, she believed that was the beginning of their demise. Our innocence is lost. Lincoln, who had called for 75,000 volunteers after Fort Sumter realizes the grave necessity of having a much bigger army and calls for 500,000 volunteers. This time, they're not going to turn away recruits like they did last time. He also realizes he needs to let McDowell go from command. McDowell just made too many blunders at Bull Run and the army was routed. So he looks to the hero of West Virginia, the little Napoleon, Mac, George B. McClellan. McClellan is going to reorganize and restructure the army, going back to the basics, discipline, and his men are going to fall in love with him, and he will fall in love with his men. He will write to his wife as he's reorganizing the men, "I find myself in a new and strange position. The President, the Cabinet, General Scott, all deferring to me. By some operation of magic, I seem to have become the power of the land."
5 minutes later.
It's November 8th, 1861. Captain Wilkes of the U.S. Navy has just intercepted the Trent off the coastline. The Trent was a British ship, and on that British ship were 2 passengers, Confederate diplomats that were bound for London. They were hoping to negotiate with the British government of getting an alliance, and if the British joined, it would be too powerful for the Union to hold. So you gotta imagine we're on a boat that would be much bigger. It would be wood with sails, and Captain Wilkes would not have had cannons like this, but you know, he was able to intercept his ship. The British responded with, "Excuse me, but what you're doing is wrong, and if you don't release those 2, well, we'll have to go to war with you." President Lincoln, already upset about the situation in the South, said, "We can only afford one war at a time," so he let the 2 diplomats go. The Navy, which captured the British ship, the Trent, with the 2 Confederate diplomats, they had a success there. But for the Navy, it was very difficult in 1861. They had 3,500 miles of southern coastline that they had to patrol, and they were supposed to put a blockade. That's difficult. 3,500 miles of coastline with less than 40 ships at the start of 1861? 9 out of 10 Confederate blockade runners are going to be able to make their escape through the Union blockade. But as the war progresses and the Union Navy continues to grow, those numbers will change. What helped the Union Navy was the idiocracy of the Confederacy. Knowing that they needed England on their side, they thought they would put economic pressure on Great Britain, people that they were wanting to help them. And so they boycotted their cotton that they needed to sell to England. This is going to be brilliance here. They boycotted sending their cotton over to England. England was like, "All right, we'll just go to India. Thanks." And this is how 1861 comes to a close. Sort of lackluster. The Union is licking their wounds from both Fort Sumter and Bull Run. Sure, they have this hero that's going to save them in George B. McClellan, but he's taking his time. He got the army in July, and as December has yet to do anything with them, except for march them around and teach them how to shoot. England is going to be a concern. I mean, after all, they did come to the aid of the Confederate diplomats. And there is the threat that they may one day join the Confederacy. Lincoln and the Union could not fight both England and a torn nation with the South. 1861 had some casualties, but as we roll into 1862, we're going to see it's a very different style of war, and it will become a very bloody affair. All right, guys, that is it for today. As always, remain awesome, be nice, stay safe. I'll see you soon.